So our next speaker, her name is Ruhani Walia. And Ruhani Walia is a 17-year-old innovator, blockchain developer, and economics enthusiast with a vision to enact positive change using emerging technologies. As a powerful young woman of color, she hopes to leverage her skills and perspective to empower others like her and much more people all around the world. And she's just coming from an exam, like I mentioned too. So Ruhani, I'm sure you're eager to get started.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks so much for the intro. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So how do you define the why of your passion? Why are you working on X, Y, Z? Why do you care? For the most part, I think we all want to leave behind some sort of legacy. And I think that legacy can be divided into three. The first is wanting to be remembered for who you are. That is your personality. The second is wanting to be remembered for what you did, so your actions. And the third is wanting to be remembered for why you did what you did, and that's your purpose. Regardless of which of these resonates most with you, the common theme amongst all of them, and what I'm here to talk about today, is the human desire to make an impact. Now, before I go any further, I do believe I should introduce myself. I'm Ruhani, I'm 17. I love economics, literature, and I'm currently learning how I can use emerging technologies to eventually achieve my goal of impacting billions. Now, you might be wondering, what is this 17-year-old going to tell me about making an impact? I believe the youth have the power. I just also think they aren't always necessarily taught how to harness that power in novel ways. We like to rehash things a lot, and I've been lucky enough to get some of this very specific training. A couple of months ago, I joined a program called the Knowledge Society, and am literally a changed human. For context of how changed, I went from having to study for hours on end to hit the high marks I needed, joining every extracurricular club I could, and planning school events, and all of that being my world, to getting to do crazy, amazing things like being one of the youngest people ever invited to attend IBM's largest developer conference, or filming a web series about the future of 5G tech with Rogers, and speaking at Procter & Gamble about how we can use blockchain to promote female economic autonomy, to being invited to one of the world's largest festivals, South by Southwest, to talk about social good. And finally, to this summer, having the amazing opportunity to intern at a multi-billion-dollar company, all while maintaining my average at school. Now to answer the million-dollar question that I'm sure is running through all of your heads. How did that happen? How did I become Ruhani 2.0? You see, a lot has changed over the past couple of months, and in retrospect, I believe there are three main components that have helped me evolve the way I have and as drastically as I have. Hopefully what I share with you today will be as valuable for you as it has been for me. So the first bucket I want to talk about is emerging technology, and more specifically, investing your time and energy into it. So I'll talk about some of the projects I've worked on, and I'll explain them a little bit. But first of all, why is this something that helped me evolve? Why is this something that contributed to creating Ruhani 2.0? I think of it in two ways. I think there's only two real ways to make an impact in the world that don't require you to be like the next Albert Einstein. Not that you couldn't, just that it would be much harder. The first is being a suit. So being an executive at a big company, super fancy, making big bucks. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you are ambitious and you care, you'd use your position of power to create change. A side note, change doesn't have to be big or immediate. As humans, we're really bad at understanding exponential growth and exponential compounding. We're impatient. We like to see linear results, a fair amount every single time. Anyways, like I said, there's two ways. The second way, and the way that I prefer, is being an innovator. More specifically, learning about emerging tech and finding some sort of issue that bothers you or annoys you and trying to better the world. Now, don't get me wrong, other vocations are amazing. I just don't think anything quite has the same potential reach as emerging technology does. Things like blockchain or nanotech or wireless power transfer. Now that I've explained why emerging tech has been important for me, let's look at some of the projects I've made. So the very first tech that I got into was OpenMed, and it was blockchain based. And this is a flow chart that I made to explain kind of the development of the platform. It looks very complicated, and I'll give a quick high level of all you really need to get from this is that the top area is a breakdown of the back-end development of the platform, and the bottom is the front end. So it's kind of like if you had a fill-in form on a website, creating the color of the submit button is something a front-end design aspect would be, and then back-end would be getting a database to collect all that information, things like that. So this is a website for OpenMed, which is basically a platform trying to give patients ownership over their medical records and also the chance to sell their medical data to researchers in academia. And OpenMed solves two problems. The first is a lack of patient autonomy, obviously, and the second is a lack of open resources and crowd sharing of resources in the medical community. We all want to be the ones to say that we discovered something, and that's a huge, huge detriment to our progress. We don't like to share things, and especially in academia, it's been a big, big issue. And so OpenMed is trying to help absolve that. Another project I'll talk about is Gamma. So the energy consumption that we have has been increasing and is predicted to continue to increase. And what hasn't been predicted to be increasing is our use of nuclear energy. It's nearly stagnant. I'm talking about nuclear energy because it is the most efficient source of energy we have available. In fact, it's 8,000 times more efficient per gram than any substitute fossil fuel or natural gas. Why aren't we using it? The answer is valid, and it's because of the extreme amounts of radioactive waste that are produced. So Gamma is trying to use nanotechnology to turn nuclear energy into clean energy, and I'll explain how. So the first part is using micro robots, which comes from a part of nanotech called nanorobotics. So basically, they're really, really tiny programmable robots. And what they're able to do is detect radioactive ions in contaminated areas or in waste. And radioactive ions is what actually makes the material and the waste dangerous. So by capturing those radioactive ions, and I won't get super in depth about the tech here and the science, but they act as something called an exchange material. And once they capture that radioactive ion, they kind of stabilize it. So it becomes safe to dispose of and handle. But Gamma doesn't stop there. We don't just want to improve management of waste, we want to recycle it. So the second part uses nanomaterial crystals, which actually extract the excess radiation from the captured ions to create electricity. It's pretty cool. The final project I'll talk about is Kidogo. And Tezra mentioned this too, so I'm sure you all have a basic understanding of what the challenge was. But we got to consult for an early childhood development company in Kenya and propose to them ways that they could scale at quality. So how could they take their affordable and valuable childcare services to other low-income communities across Eastern Africa? Now, our solutions to this weren't particularly technical. We had ideas of a digital curriculum and starting an industry standard program, all things that seem relatively simple to us here. So why am I mentioning this? Because I'm 17 and I had the opportunity to work on a project like this with an actual company to potentially create real change. This is the website that we made for our recommendation. It was all very professional, and it was really awesome to learn all about the economics and the cultural differences. And a project like this is the only real place that you can find motivation to learn things that you never would have seen yourself needing to learn in the first place. And especially with Kidogo, like Tejru mentioned, they're reviewing our decks and recommendations right now. It's so crazy to me that all I had to do, and given it was quite intense, is spend 3 weeks researching, reaching out to masters in industry, and potentially have the chance to impact the lives of thousands and thousands of kids and give them a better childhood education. Blows my mind. Anyways, that was the first bucket that's contributed to my evolution. The second one I want to talk about is mindset. Perhaps what I found even more valuable than the exposure to tech over the past couple of months is being able to really solidify and genuinely internalize some of the habits that the most successful people in the world have. And I'll share some with you today that have really worked for me. So the first one is figuring stuff out. It sounds pretty simple, but you'd be surprised by how many people don't train their intellectual horsepower. This is the amount of sweat you can put into understanding something. It's basically a question. How high is your bar for difficulty? A really great way of training this mindset is to try learning things, or even better, building things on your own. And something that I really like to keep in mind, and it's something we all unconsciously do, is that any challenge that you've ever faced in your life at one point seemed really difficult until you did it. And this is something we all do unconsciously. We're unconsciously optimistic in this way. We forget to think about all of the progress that we've made, and we just kind of start looking towards the next thing that we need to get over. So I think that if we are to be more cognizant of this kind of optimistic, unconscious thing that we're already doing, we'll just expedite our process of raising that bar of difficulty even more. The next mindset I want to talk about is only doing things that serve you. An incredibly intelligent man named Tom Billio said that, and it's stuck in my mind ever since, and it's been months. And I love this one because it's different for everyone. For me, investing in school is a huge priority, always has been and always will be. But now this year, I've learned that investing in myself is also a huge priority. Learning unique experiences and knowledge is different from doing well at school. It's different to invest in yourself and to invest in school. And for me, needing to do well at both things required that I optimize my time. So for me, doing what served me was optimizing my time, my schedule, getting better at time management. I used to think I knew what time management was. Me now actually knows what time management is, and I'm sure I'll be saying the same thing a couple of years from now. But for you, it might be something else. It might be recognizing the small things that stop you from focusing right away, like leaving a tab open or refusing to clean your desk before you sit down. These things compound and can eventually become a massive deterrent to your progress. The final mindset that I want to talk about is making thinking time. Now, for those of you who don't necessarily like meditation or reflecting or writing or things like that, this one will be more about discipline for you and finding a different way to mark your progress. I mention this because the best way to stop yourself from repeating a mistake is to identify it. And things that remove you from focusing on what you need to be focusing on are mistakes. That's the definition an analogy I'm trying to use here. So at the end of the day, if I sit down and I actually block out time to think about what it was that caused me to be distracted, I can identify what those things are and lower the probability that those same things are what are going to distract me the next day. We want to improve by 1% every day. It's a mantra I try to live by, and it's helped a lot. I think Henry Ford said it best. He said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. It's all up here. And what's even crazier to me, and I've been thinking about this a lot too, is productivity is totally a choice. Sometimes I'll be sitting down to work, be ready, have nothing else to do, have my assignment, and I just won't do it because I don't feel like doing it. And it's at times like those that you have to have the mental clarity to realize that something is causing you to be distracted and you're choosing to let it affect you. Now, the final bucket of my evolution is people. People are everything. And it's so important that you recognize who is around you. The very first time I heard the phrase that you are the sum of your 5 closest friends, I was shocked into like a state of reflection for at least 2 months. And it's not that the people around me were bad. It's that I realized I was unconsciously mimicking the people and what they were doing and not necessarily wanting to be mimicking those things. A really great trick I've learned is if you can't change your environment, there's only one other thing you can do, and that's create a new environment. And the best way to do that is by listening to podcasts. Sounds very simple, again, I know, but you literally get to listen in on conversations from some of the world's most intelligent people as if you're there. Sounds a little bit creepy, but it's insanely, insanely valuable. So those are basically all of my points about people in terms of trying to pick the ones that are around you. One more thing I do want to mention, though, is that you can't ever just rely on one person, as bleak as that sounds. And that's because you will always need something else in a different environment. Now, I'll explain what I mean. You should always be looking for your TQP. These are your total quality people. Your total quality person is someone who in an environment is there to let you know that you're not operating at your best self. You're not being your best version. They're able to identify what parts of you could have improvement. But the fact is, you're a dynamic person. You are different in every environment. And it's unfair of us to assume we're being inauthentic when we're more than one version of ourselves. People have different versions because you have different levels of depth and understanding with different people, so it's only natural. And by virtue of that being true, it's unfair to assume that any one person can be your TQP for all the versions of you in all of your environments. It's a really important thing to think about, especially as you start to configure those 5 people. So that's it. That's the answer to how I went from being a nerd with a small scope on a conventional path to linear success, to being still very much a nerd, but now with a massive scope on an unconventional path to exponential success. I hope some of the things that I've said to you today have been valuable and that you're thinking of ways of maybe some habits that I've mentioned to transform your own life and expedite your journey to your own definition of success. Thanks.